Welcome to the ResourceSpots.com podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Steve Strandsman. As always, I'm joined by Corey Fleck and Carter Smith, and today we're going to talk a fair amount about currencies in a couple of different forms. So rather than introduce the articles one by one, let's just get right into it. Corey, why don't you start us off, bud?
Thanks, Steve. My article revolved around looking at kind of other currencies other than the U.S. currency. Because as we touched on last week and even a couple weeks before that, I say that there are other currencies out there that are in far worse shape than the U.S.
Like which ones, for example?
Well, I found this video from CNBC that had Dennis Gartman. Now, Gartman is not usually on the gold bandwagon. However, in this interview, he really said that a catalyst for the continued expansion of the gold price will really be the currencies, not necessarily the American dollar, which the Europeans have no choice. They're going to need to essentially print money and expand their monetary base just because we have Greece, we have Spain who are unable to issue bonds. They keep on running a deficit. We know the EU just had to push back their budget talks. And then we also go into Japan. Japan's struggling. Reading different articles, we see that Japan has officially fallen into a recession. The upcoming prime minister in Japan, or the one that is touted to win this upcoming election, is a firm believer of expanding their monetary policy and taking away some of the constraints that they have. This is just going to lead to the Japanese printing more and more yen, which, again, is a reserve currency in the EU's eyes. And finally, we dive into the Chinese currency, which I have a chart in our article where over the last 10 years, the Chinese currency's monetary supply has grown by over 5% or over 5 times, which is quite a growth. And the more money that is in the system, the better that is for gold, because gold has a very defined supply. It is not growing at any rate really compared to any of these money supplies. And the more money that is printed equals more money flowing into gold. Therefore, demand increases, supply stays the same, price goes up.
So the price is going up on gold. Do you not see that as also a reflection then of the rising cost of finding gold? I mean, we do a lot of talking with like Lawrence Ralston and Eric Coffin, and they talk about how a lot of the gold price, the prices, while it's definitely tied to the currencies, it's also tied to the rising cost of production, as in the low-hanging fruit, as Eric Coffin likes to say, is all been kind of scooped up. These deposits are getting harder and harder to find. As Lawrence Ralston also says, the average grade of a gold mine has gone down precipitously, in the last several years. So do you not see that as a valid point for also the price of gold going up?
I think that speaks more to the supply staying stagnant, because the higher the price of gold, the more profitable it is to mine these lower grade reserves. And yes, the high grade reserves are taken, they are being mined or have been mined. However, right now, with the higher price in gold, it makes it more profitable or actually worthwhile to mine these lower grades. So I don't think that plays into the price of gold, because the gold price is not set. It's variable. It moves with the market. So the more demand, the more money that is coming in to the gold market brings up the gold price.
I'm kind of interested by this, actually, and this is kind of a side note from what we're really talking about here in your article, but do you think that there's a point where gold as a store of value hits kind of a top limit? So, like, is there a limit for what the price of gold will be, therefore a limit in terms of what the grade of gold must be to be mineable, like almost like a peak gold kind of idea?
I guess it could. Well, no, not really. Just because the price it costs to pull gold out of the ground really is dependent on labor, essentially. Labor in these different countries. And energy, yeah. Labor and energy are the two major inputs into gold production. So I don't think that really has... Well, if those keep on going up, then it's going to make gold more expensive to mine. Therefore, less will come on the market. Therefore, there's even less supply compared to this greater demand. There are two factors that will make gold go up: increased demand or less supply.
But gold, generally speaking, in terms of the vast majority of gold that's purchased, isn't purchased to be used. So there's no end game for the product in the way that there is for silver, even, or potash, or things that are not used as hedges or stores of value, right? So the supply of gold, even though it's purchased out of the free market, a lot of it's still sitting there on the sidelines. So I would almost argue that the supply of gold doesn't decrease in the same way that the supply of other commodities decreases when they're purchased out of the open market.
Well, it's not like silver. Silver may be used in products, but it's still there. It still can be melted down and produced back into silver. Gold is one of those long-term speculative plays where people hold it. People don't go out there and buy gold and then instantly go out and actively trade it in the world. And especially look at the biggest gold consumers or gold holders. Those are countries. They're not out there trading gold. They're out there holding it as a value to maintain or stabilize their currency.
The interesting thing about what you just said is that, getting back to the currency topic, is that we've been talking a lot about Canada recently and how Canada's currency, it's been hinted at, may become a reserve currency of the IMF. Now, Canada also is a country that has an enormous abundance of natural resources, gold included. So if you're talking about countries being the main buyers and holders of the majority of bullion out there, does this not give countries like Canada, Mexico, the United States, China, which are big producers of gold, does this not give them a strategic advantage over non-producing countries of gold in the currency game?
I wonder if it would just encourage more countries to be more active and less passive in terms of their involvement in the commodities that sit within their countries. So rather than allowing a foreign company to come in and exploit the resources that you have and take their profits back to Canada or back to the United States or wherever they're home based, maybe, could we see more of an involvement on a kind of national level by these governments to ensure that the money stays home?
Well, I think it all depends on who's going in and how these governments stand currently, because we see these issues in Venezuela and countries like that where they try to take back these resources and then all of a sudden they don't have a local company that can actually produce these resources, so therefore they're not making any money.
Right.
So there's a certain balance between what they can get out of a company taking these resources outside of their borders by taking a royalty or whatever it might be, so at least they get something out of it, because really it just sitting in the ground isn't doing them any good either.
Yeah, and you see that in some of the poorer countries too. In 2010, I was in Guyana and I met with the Prime Minister actually, and he was very much on board with getting foreign investment in the form of exploration and production in there, because as far as local mining productions go, we went and visited some of the biggest local productions, and compared to some of the humongous mills that exist around the world, I mean, I'm sitting here looking at the Guyanese local gold production, and it's something that's just kind of out in the jungle, and a group of guys sitting around a handmade sluice box. So, I mean, when there's something to be said about foreign investment being able to ramp up production to a level that's beneficial to everyone involved.
And, I think that at the end of the day, gold isn't going anywhere, obviously, as a store of value. And as long as people continue to hold it and not trade it on a regular basis in the way that we were talking about in terms of the major holders, then we're going to see the demand remain for gold. And also, as the economies around the world continue to struggle, gold will continue to have a place as a hedge and as a store. Now that moves us right into our next story, which is investing in Bitcoins as an alternative currency. So Bitcoins are, if you don't know, it's a decentralized, untraceable digital currency. It's been around since about 2009, and it's actually the world's most widely traded alternative currency with a current market cap of over $100 million. I think today it sits at around 140 million US. The beauty of this system, besides its untraceability, is that it's not tied to a central bank, and it has a fixed money supply. So the algorithm that they've used for this ensures that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoins ever. Now, how it all works, we can talk about it more. There's a link in the article that actually sends you to their wiki page, which can do a way better job of describing this than I can. But I thought it was interesting that this week it took a big step towards legitimacy, having been recognized by the European law as a registered payment service provider, or a PSP, which is the same thing as PayPal or whatnot. So this provides protection for people who are concerned about the cryptic, anonymous nature of these Bitcoins, and that kind of legitimacy can only increase the transparency, increase the implementation of the Bitcoin as a currency going forward. Now, have you guys heard about Bitcoins before?
I had heard about it briefly before you'd started writing this article, and when you started writing this article, I found it very interesting. And the one thing that stands out to me, not only that it is slowly being accepted as a form of payment, but this is also being assisted by the simple fact that we are moving away from cash. It is more and more common to now you can use a bank card, a credit card, or even if you've heard of Google Wallet, where you can simply just swipe your phone in front of a machine and then you pay for a product. That too is leading to an acceptance of this digital currency where you don't need to carry around cash anymore. Soon you're just going to need to carry around your cell phone. And what's to say if you're paying with Canadian dollars, American dollars, or Bitcoins?
So I guess what I'm asking here is, do you see the Bitcoin, an online currency which has no national associations with any world banks or anything like that, as being a long-term viable solution, or at least a viable option?
It's an interesting scenario because, all money is only as good as where it's accepted, right?
Exactly.
If you can't buy anything with a form of currency, then it doesn't serve the purpose that it's created for. So, right now, as you said in your article, the Bitcoin system and the group of retailers that are accepting it is growing, but it's definitely not, a worldwide kind of thing yet. But it's definitely an interesting idea that is indicative of the trend that Corey was talking about here towards, a digital cashless money system. The thing that I found kind of interesting / confusing about the whole thing is, you say it's not tied to any type of central bank or anything like that. Now, I understand that in a direct sense, but, what are the owners of Bitcoins holding? How does one buy Bitcoins? You have to buy it in some type of central bank denominated currency, right? So, are the owners of Bitcoins and the creators of Bitcoins, are they, holding their profits in Bitcoins? How is this working from because they are indirectly tied to central banks, right?
Well, it also opens up the possibility of trading, exchanging one thing for a Bitcoin. It doesn't need to necessarily be currency.
Right. Currency's only, as you said, currency's only good as a store of value, as something that has perceived value. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper or a number on the computer screen.
Well, it has to be exchangeable and it has to be transferable, right? And so as it stands right now, I can't walk, to a local market with a pocket full of Bitcoins.
No, but the idea is what Corey's saying, is that increasingly we're not walking to a market with anything that's substantially different than a pocket full of Bitcoins. We're walking there with a barcode that has our information on it, or our cell phone, which has our information on it.
No, I agree with you that it not being tied to any central bank or anything of that stature will scare people away, because what's to say that it won't be hacked or controlled or manipulated? However, it is leading towards a more free market, is it not?
Yeah, definitely. But the idea there too, which leads me to my other question about it, and hopefully you can shed some light on this, is that if it is inherently capped at 21 million Bitcoins, say this idea does take off and people start to really kind of get in, and all of a sudden you see a swelling of the number of users of Bitcoins, how are they going to keep the ceiling at 21 million? Like, how does that work?
I think it's a great question, and quite frankly, I can't give you a solid answer on that. But I think that the way it's designed, I mean, it is inherently limited. But as Corey said, it is traded. It's openly traded. Within the article, there's a link to some Bitcoin charts, which provide the the price of a Bitcoin in US dollars year over year or day over day, like any other chart.
Mm-hmm.
And so to that end, I think that you could see it being capped and being traded like any other currency. I guess it's not tied to gold or GDP or what have you, but I could also argue that right now other currencies in the world aren't necessarily tied to anything either. As more and more money gets printed via QE and things like that, we're seeing less association on a dollar-to-dollar basis with a country's output, and more the idea of the currency being the value of the currency.
I don't know necessarily about that. I think a country's currency is more reflective of the country's ability to produce and based on GDP and also it's tax based, to be quite honest. And so I think the country's currency is more reflective of value. It's just not the traditional idea of value that we have from the currencies of old.
Well, I think touching back on the one point of if it's capped at the 21 million Bitcoins, whatever it might be, it's not to say that it can't be further divided into half Bitcoins, or people can start trading portions of those Bitcoins. So
I was going to say, are there bit dimes and bit
There are.
quarters out there?
Where is it? There's a number of essentially a number of zeros that it can be traded down to.
Interesting. So they'll just continue to subdivide the Bitcoin currency as more and more users come online.
As needed, yeah. There might be a cap, which is probably a good thing, but if you think about it in a almost back to a gold sense, there's also a cap in gold by how much they're producing. So there will be.
Is that downward kind of dilution not the same as extending the money supply, though? Because as more and more people come online, if you continue to subdivide the Bitcoin down, isn't it sort of the same as increasing the supply?
No, because your one Bitcoin is not worth less. It's actually worth more, because if more people are holding, like, say, half a Bitcoin, so 10 people have one Bitcoin, but then 9 of those people give another 9 people half of their Bitcoin, your one Bitcoin is technically worth double as much now. So it's the reverse of the money supply being extended in a sense.
Right. But I mean, you're bringing more people online. It's becoming more widely accepted. You're subdividing it down. A Bitcoin is a Bitcoin is a Bitcoin. But, I mean, do the price of goods not change in reflection of how many people are coming online and how many times you're subdividing down?
Are you saying that it almost becomes like deflationary?
In a sense, like I'm saying that like as you are adding more people into the Bitcoin system, but keeping the number of Bitcoins the same, right? There has to be a reflection of the price of goods relative to a Bitcoin as well.
Of course.
So that's what I'm saying.
But I just don't understand how it would be any different than going to a store today and saying this costs $1 Canadian or 95 cents American or whatever it is. Like, how is that any different? How will that change if there's, a finite number of Bitcoins or not?
My point is that it won't change, in that, like this whole like capping of the Bitcoins is, at 21 million is not necessarily going to have an effect if you continue to add people on and break the Bitcoin down into lower denominations.
I think it only goes down to 5 decimal places. So it says that the last price here on Mount Gox, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is the major Bitcoin exchange. The last price was for one Bitcoin was $13.86390 American for one Bitcoin.
Interesting.
So yeah, I guess that's it. And I just found it an interesting idea. especially that as an openly traded currency, which is what it is, it's had a 100% return year over year if you had invested in it 1 year ago today. And I think that kind of investment opportunity is at least interesting and something that people should be aware of. And that's really all we were getting at here. Moving on to our third and final story. Carter, why don't you lead us through here, bud?
So this is just kind of a fun little idea that I got from listening to one of the videos that we shot in San Francisco. A few weeks back, we had a dinner and we shot a video there called United We Stand. And it was just a number of different speakers from the San Francisco Hard Assets Investment Conference that came to dinner and kind of shared some of their ideas on the economy and where the country is going and that sort of thing. And one of the speakers was Chris Berry, and he got up and gave a little kind of personal anecdote about how every Christmas since his young daughter has been born, he's been buying her and giving her 1 ounce of gold and 1 ounce of silver. And I thought that was kind of an interesting idea because, I know if I was a kid, and I received a gold coin or a silver coin, I know how I would have reacted. I know how some other kids might react as well. Some kids won't understand it. But I thought it was just an interesting idea because it opened the opportunity to kind of discuss money and value and the positive aspects of saving with the younger generation. But then I started thinking about it a little bit more, and I was curious, what that type of thing, that type of tradition would mean had we started kind of further back. Like, obviously, Chris has only had the opportunity to have this tradition go on with his daughter for a few years, but I was curious if someone had done this same tradition, say back starting in 1970, what that would look like. And so I went back and I found some historic numbers on gold and silver and, took the average yearly price from 1970 all the way to 2012 and added it all up. And supposing somebody received 1 ounce of gold and 1 ounce of silver, and you took the yearly price, whoever was giving them these coins as gifts would have spent approximately $18,870 on gold and $365.95 on silver. Whereas today, if you cashed all that in, the total value of 42 ounces of gold would be $71,740, and the silver would be $1,381. So those are two price increases of 280 and 277%, which strikes me as a pretty good investment over 42 years for the long term.
I have an interesting little anecdote here. When I was growing up, my grandfather actually purchased each myself, my brother, and my sister an ounce of gold, which was to be given to us on our 21st birthday. And with it came a little newspaper clipping that said, gold could be worth $500 an ounce. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, especially, coming at it now and being involved in it so closely. I think it's, it is a fun exercise, and it is fun to see, if you were able to, see these events, coming down the pike here, able to kind of act on your beliefs and your, strong-willed in that sense. I think that you could see, obviously you saw huge returns.
Well, it just goes to show what Corey was talking about with his article, and just that, gold and silver to an extent inherently holds value. And that was another reason I found it intriguing, from the personal anecdote point of view, is because when I was growing up, my dad had a similar tradition in that when each one of us, the kids, I come from a family of 5, graduated high school, he would give us a graduation present. And he gave my younger brother an ounce of gold, and he gave my older sister 100 ounces of silver, which is pretty significant. He just gave her a big brick of silver, and
silver paperweight.
I remember at her graduation party when he gave it to her, she kind of opened it up and she just kind of looked. I mean, she didn't know what to make of it because you're an 18-year-old kid, you're out of school, you just care about cars and going to college, that kind of thing. And she opened up and gets this big 100-ounce brick of silver, and I think she actually left it at the house. It was my doorstop for a long time, but she finally actually wound up selling it in 2005 for I think $500 or $700, is how much she got for it. And I talked to her about it today because I was curious as to, I couldn't remember exactly how big it was as I was writing the article.
You got to be killing herself.
And she asked me how much it was worth now, and I said, it's actually, probably north of $3,000 now. And yeah, she started kicking herself a bit.
I think an interesting comparison to make, rather than giving, say, a bar of silver or whatever, like an ounce of gold, what happens if you were to reinvest that money into an RRSP or an actual retirement savings plan, which we all know took quite the beating in 2008. Some of these have been pulled off the table. Others have gone down. It would have been a much more, I would say, solid investment of your hard-earned cash, rather than giving it as a present, but also sending it, actually putting it into a savings account and just holding on to that and saving up for your retirement, rather than just simply giving it as a present. It actually would have been a great way to help your retirement savings grow.
Hey, look, I mean, I think we can all agree that if we all had silver or all had crystal balls, we'd be pretty great investors. But also a silver ball or a gold ball would be all right too. So that's it for this week here for us. Now, just to let you guys know, the Pulse poll question is now closed. The question was, what will be resolved first, the fiscal cliff or the EU budget crisis? And 70% of the respondents said that it would be the fiscal cliff, with the other remaining 30% believing that both would just kick the can a little farther down the road. Now, our new Pulse poll question is, which currency is in the worst shape? The US dollar, the euro, or the yen? Make sure you vote early, vote often, get your voices heard, and we'll be right back after this.
For exclusive video, radio, and written content on commodities investing, visit resourcespots.com. Resourcespots.com. Superior commodities investment insight.